Hi, I'm Mike Tarkanian. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Material Science and Engineering at MIT.
Hi, I'm Kate Scott. I'm a senior undergraduate in the Department of Material Science at MIT, and I'm Mike's Year Up. Today we're going to talk about the document pillow that we've made together along with a couple other Year Ops over the course of a few years.
Our motivation behind developing the document pillow was to create a surface that would allow people to digitally image documents that made it easier and faster for the imaging to occur, especially for locked or folded documents, because what happens typically in the way that people digitally image folded documents is that they have the letter unfolded and they do a number of things to it to make it scannable or photographable. You can see the surface of the letter has many facets and folds and wrinkles, and that's bad from a digital imaging perspective because each one of these folds reflects light differently, and those reflections of light create differences in color. And one of the important things, especially for conservators, is that the color of the document is consistent and has to meet certain international standards. So imaging of documents that have been folded is a real problem because neutralizing all of those folds in the image is difficult.
We see that conservators right now have to take a really time-intensive process of either shimming in order to create a flat surface, or worst case, humidifying the letters and removing their folds permanently so we lose the information of the locking of the letter.
The other problem that often occurs is the wax seals on letters that are out of the plane of the paper, so that presents another difficulty of imaging. Since it's not a flat surface, if these are sandwiched between plates of glass, as they typically are, that raised wax surface creates inconsistencies in the photography or in the scanning. So the original idea behind the document pillow is that we have a really conformal, soft, squishy surface that when the letter is placed on it and we place a sheet of glass on top, the conformal surface below contours to the letter, contours to the wax, and easily creates a flat surface that can be imaged or scanned.
Yeah, and protects the fragile wax seals from being hurt during this process.
The entire system has been designed to not be reactive or inert or adhesive, so that nothing in this pillow will interact or damage the document. The material in the document pillow won't affect the letter or the wax in any way. It'll conserve the qualities of the letter as is.
So we purchased some sample letters from eBay. We wanted to be able to test our document pillow without having to use the actual artifacts. So our letters, to be representative, they have wax seals and they have writing that are similar to what the artifacts we want to image eventually are. So to use our document cushion, you would unfold the sample letter, and our sample has a wax seal in the corner, and that would be put face down on the document cushion and flatten it out as best you can. And then the key comes with adding the weight. So a clear glass sheet can then be placed over the letter, being careful not to add any additional folds. And once that weight is on, we have an image that we can take of a folded letter that has a lot less visual color loss. And on the other side, we have a representative image with the seal still pressed and protected into our cushion.
So the idea is that conservators can take their documents, lay glass on top of them as they normally would, and the weight of that glass brings all of the folds close to plane so that the document still meets the international color standards, but the clarity of the pillow on the other side allows the conservators to be able to flip the document over and image the other side, flip it over, image the glass slide, and conserve all of the color information through the clear polymer. The clarity of the pillow also allows us to backlight documents. That enables us to image watermarks or other information in the documents that aren't so easily imaged typically. To make our document pillow, we start with EcoFlex gel from Smooth On. It's a really soft two-part rubber, silicone rubber, that you mix the two parts together and then over time it cures. I think there's probably a number of gels or rubbers that would work for a document pillow, but this is what we've found to work the best. And to make the pillow, you have to mix these two parts together carefully, pour it into a receptacle that holds the shape of the pillow, and then pull a vacuum on the gel to remove all air bubbles so that the layer of rubber remains clear. And this is the process we're going to walk you through now. So we start with our A and B parts of rubber. You can open the buckets. And Kate's going to pour equal parts into our cups. This is a 1-to-1 mix by volume. Or do you want me to pour?
We're going to pour? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit of a mess.
Good.
Okay.
Good. And it's important to wear gloves while you do this because this is a skin irritant. Do you want to pull that bucket out?
Yeah.
So now these are getting put into the bowl in equal parts.
Yeah. I'll clean it.
And then this needs to be mixed together so that the parts A and B can react and form the silicone that we need to be our document support material.
It's also important to take note of what time you start mixing them together because the pot life of this material is about 15 minutes and then it starts to gel and thicken.
So you want to start
Yeah.
taping? When we pull a vacuum on this material, it actually inflates quite a bit. So in our vessel that we're using to contain the gel, it has some handles in the side, and we tape up the holes in those handles to prevent the material from leaking out the sides.
We try to wait till the
Careful
last
with that.
minute to take out our vessel so that we avoid any dust or particles that could get trapped in this vessel.
It's important in this whole process to keep dust down. Any dust that gets in the gel or in the tray in this case will be there forever and be in your images when you're scanning documents. So we've been really careful to clean the bowl, to clean the tray, to clean the vessel that we're going to pull a vacuum in, just so there's no dust anywhere in the final document pillow.
Okay. Once the tray has been taped, I'll look at it one more time and try to do a final dust wipe down.
So at this point, we're ready to pour, and you can see the silicone I've been mixing has quite a bit of air in it. I mean, that whiteness you see are bubbles that have been whipped in during the process. You could pull a vacuum on this as it is right now and remove some of the bubbles, but we've found it to be effective just to pour it at this state and then pull a vacuum later. So I'm going to pour this mixed silicone into the tray. And this will coat our entire bottom here, and it'll flow and fill out all of the area.
Sometimes it takes some extra gravity. Okay. So the ideal is a thin, even layer across the entire bottom of the cushion.
So you can see all of the bubbles in the surface now, and that's a big problem, and was actually one of the hardest things we had to overcome, was figure out how to get those bubbles out and make this pillow perfectly clear.
So now we have our thin coat of silicone rubber across our entire layer. Now that we have our thin layer of silicone rubber, we can take this and put it in our vacuum chamber.
It's important to make sure whatever you're putting your document pillow into to pull a vacuum on it is level. So we've leveled this ahead of time so that it's gonna dry and cure the the silicone flat so that it's not uneven. And it's worth taking a level inside your
Especially here.
vessel. See how far off level this is? That would make the silicone cure unevenly across the pillow, so we level in both dimensions. So we have a vacuum pump hooked up to the cap of this pressure vessel. Kate's going to turn the vacuum on, I'm going to stick it on, and we're going to pull a vacuum several times over the next 10 minutes. We found that successive instances of vacuum are better at getting the air out. So how long do we pull each?
I do it for 2 minutes, the first 3 times or so, 4 times, and then smaller 1 minute increments as we're getting closer to that final end of pot life.
So after this first 2 minutes, we'll open the chamber up, take a look, see how it looks, make sure nothing's spilled, make sure it hasn't overflowed, and then we'll do it again.
And when we take off this cap, we'll see at first the silicone has actually expanded quite a bit within the container, and we'll let it level out and all those air that has come up exit from the system before we put our next vacuum on. So that's time.
Okay, so this cap is just held on by suction right now. So we vent this chamber, and then once it's vented enough, the cap will pop off. We'll take a look inside and then pump it down again.
All right.
So you can see already, if we just slide this out a little bit, there's still a lot of bubbles, but it looks a lot different than when it went in originally.
Let's level it again.
So we'll level again. Okay.
The idea is just to make sure that you have less pressure above the silicone cushion so the air wants to go out instead of stay in the silicone.
Yeah. Yeah, so you don't need an amazing vacuum. You just need less pressure than is around you in normal conditions. And this box looks complicated and fancy. It's just a can. So you can adopt anything you want as long as when you pull a vacuum on it, it doesn't crush itself.
Airtight, not crushing
Yeah,
itself.
anything that's airtight will work.
We do this process of pumping the vacuum up and down anywhere from 3 to 5 times, depending on what point you get scared in the pot life and when you're worried it would just start gelling.
Once you notice the silicone starting to set up, you really shouldn't pull a vacuum on it anymore, because then it can expand and set into shape and not lay flat.
Perfect.
Okay, so if we pull this out now, it's actually almost fully transparent, still not set up, so you don't want to angle it like I just did or it'll move. But that's good, that's what you want, no bubbles. So we're going to put this back into the vessel, make sure that it's level again. And then we're going to let it sit overnight to cure.
And one comment I would make is if there's still a few small bubbles when you're starting to get towards the end of that pot life, a few times we've actually let those stay in and they'll go out on their own as it starts to set up over time.
Yeah, so if after this process you see some bubbles on the surface, don't be tempted to pull another vacuum, just let it go. This is an early prototype of the document pillow that we made, and you can see if you look at it that it's full of tiny air bubbles. And this is what can happen if you don't pull an adequate vacuum on your rubber, or you don't pull a vacuum at all. This was actually a version that we just poured the rubber in air and we let it cure overnight. So the bigger bubbles work their way out. The solid bubbles will not unless you pull a vacuum on it. We showed this to some conservators. They really liked the physical part of the prototype, the way it conformed to the letters and how easy it was to use, but these tiny air bubbles make it unusable for archival and imaging use. So the last step in making the document pillow is to apply a silicone film to the surface of the silicone that we just cured. And the reason for that is that the EcoFlex gel, while soft and good for conforming to the document, is really quite tacky, and you don't want to put your documents down on a tacky surface. So we found a really thin silicone film. It's about 10 thousandths thick, and it's really flexible and not tacky. So we apply this film cut to size to the cured silicone document pillow, and that gives us a good elastic surface that won't interfere with the document. The film comes supplied between two plastic backing films. So we cut it as it is with the backing film so that we can keep dust off of the film. You want to minimize dust in all of these steps. And once you remove the backing film, you have your silicone membrane that is really elastic and flexible.
It gives us that inert surface that we're looking for.
So our internal dimensions on the document pillow, or at least this version, are 11.5 inches by 19.5. So Kate's going to measure those dimensions out and mark it, and then we'll cut the sheet to shape with a razor.
And we try to always make sure we have two manufactured edges so that we can make fewer cuts and have less room for human error. All right, the next step is to put this silicone rubber, non-tacky silicone rubber, onto our set silicone rubber that we've made yesterday. So we're going to lay it down sort of like a phone screen and try to reduce as many air bubbles as possible in our first application, and then use some squeegees to try to push the rest of the air bubbles out.
So we're going to take this now out of the film, protective film. Just trim that. So that's one side of film off. And then I think we remove this as we go.
Yeah, that's what we've normally done.
So why don't you peel that off? So this is a two-person job because Kate's going to remove the backing slowly, and I'm going to take the silicone and lay it down inside the pillow.
Be a bit tricky.
And you have to be careful because the silicone underlayer is very tacky. Okay.
Make sure you push it down.
All right, so we have our silicone film now sticking to the surface, and slowly and carefully I'm going to bring that surface, the rest of the film, down to the cured silicone layer as Kate peels back the backing. So if you're as careful as possible, getting air bubbles out as you go, that's great. If you have some bubbles that are trapped as you're going, that's fine. You can always work on them afterwards with the squeegee.
We're almost at the end. So how long did it take you to get all the air bubbles out originally, Mike?
In the first prototypes?
Yes.
Well, we didn't ever really get them all out.
But it takes a while to remove all of the inconsistencies in the top layer, but it's possible.
Yeah, so once you get this down as we just did, with about probably 10 to 15 minutes of careful squeegee work, you can get all of the bubbles out.
And now the document pillow is ready to use.